Hey, how's it going? It's Dan from modular.dev, and today we're going to continue on our series on starting web development. So, in the past, we covered links and images and things like that. Today, we're kind of building off those building blocks, and we're going to start talking about how to create a website uh, that is responsive based off of the device that the user has. So, if they're on a desktop, we may have a different layout than we would on a phone, for example. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So as always, if you enjoy the video, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can get notified when we come out with new content. And let's go ahead and get started. So today, like I said, we're talking about responsive design, and you can't talk about responsive design without talking about media queries. So I put a link to the media queries MDN article in the description below, and so feel free to check that out. And basically, there's a lot of different things you can do with media queries. We're actually not going to cover most of them, but feel free to look through these and see if there's anything interesting that you like. The thing that we're going to do today, though, is using media queries to query the media's width. So something like this, where we say media max width, and then put some pixel amount that will target any screen that has that size width on it. So you can use min width as well if you want devices that have a minimum width of something. So that's what we're going to use today. But you can use a whole bunch of other things as well. So I encourage you to check these out and play around with these and see what you can come up with. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. So today I'm starting from a fairly kind of built project already, but let's go ahead and take a look and see what it looks like. So this is a page with 3 images on it, and they are in a grid. So if you remember, we talked about grid a couple weeks ago. This right here, if I look in the styles, if I look in the styles section, you can see that it's a display grid, and it has 3 columns, with each column taking up equal space, and there's a 20 pixel gap in between each column. So that's kind of standard. That's what we worked with a couple weeks ago when we talked about grids. So there's also some links at the top. We talked about links last time, so we can navigate back and forth. Right now, all the pages are exactly the same, though, with the exception of the header. It changes depending on what page you're on, just so we can tell. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. So let's go ahead and think of something here. So this is fine for a desktop user, but if you're on mobile, let's go ahead and resize this down. And I encourage you to do this on whatever websites you have, just by opening up the developer tools and resizing this. You can also hit this little phone icon up here as well, and that will put you into a device mode in which you can pick like a Pixel 2 or an iPad, that kind of thing. So you definitely can take advantage of that. I usually just use this slider here. It's a little bit faster for me, but when I'm about to fully publish the website, I will usually go into the device mode and just try it out. So anyways, let's go ahead and just see what happens. So at a certain point, these images are getting pretty small, and ideally we would maybe change to a 2-column grid so that these pictures can be larger, and then so this picture here would swing down to the second row. And there's no really easy way to do that, although the grid display makes it a lot easier. But one way we can do it is using media queries. So let's go ahead and think about maybe a good breakpoint for this. Maybe it's around here, just to make it simple. Let's say 1,000 pixels. So if we're at 1,000 pixel wide screen or less, we would want 2 columns, and if we have more than 1,000 pixels, we would want 3. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have this home photo gallery section, has an ID of home photo gallery. It also has a class of photo gallery. So when we talked about IDs and classes, I never did mention that you can actually put both of them on there. So you might want to do that for some reason. And I will actually show later about how CSS kind of determines which style to display if it has two styles. So anyways, we'll get back to that. But just for now, notice that you can put an ID and a class on there. So we're gonna target this ID, this home photo gallery, and I have a styles.css set up already. So everything under here I don't want to have to change. I'm just gonna get that off the screen, and let's go ahead and do a media query here. So you do @media. So the @ sign is very important. If you don't put that, it won't work. And in parentheses, we'll put max width 999 pixels. So that's everything 999 pixels or less. And we'll go ahead and put hashtag home photo gallery because that's the ID. And we'll change this from 3 columns to 2. So there's a couple things you should note here, and my curly brackets aren't very consistent. Here I have them on the side, and here I have them on the bottom. It doesn't matter whatever way you want to do it. But you'll notice that we have a media like section, and that section is covered by curly brackets. And inside that section, we can put different styles. So we can use the same style that we put up here and override its original style by putting it here. So if we run this now, it should work. Let's go ahead and refresh. All right, let me expand it out just so, okay, we're at 1001 pixels. And now the moment we get to 999, it switched to a 2-column grid. And we could take that a step further and say, okay, well, if we get to maybe 500 pixels, then we want it to be just a 1-column grid because it's getting too small even at that. So we can copy this whole thing, and if it's 499 pixels or less, then we're only going to have a 1-column grid. Then let's go ahead and refresh. So now when I go there, we have a 1-column grid. So that is definitely something you can do here, and it works pretty well. So just remember the media query, you can put in max width. We could put in a min width here too if we, let's just say we didn't want to put that in there for some reason. We could do a media min width 1000 pixels. And then put home photo gallery and put the 3-column grid definition in there. So we could do it either way. You could have it up here where it has display grid, gap, max width, all that, and then put the grid definitions in their own little media sections. So that's perfectly valid. Just to show you that min width works, let's go ahead and refresh this. And you can see when we get to 1000 pixels, we go back to 3 columns. And if you look, let's just look here. Well, no, let's go to the smallest size. And let's look at this in the inspector, in the styles section over here. You'll notice that there's actually 2 sections for home photo gallery. Well, 3 if you include the original one. And here we see media max width 499, media max width 999. And the reason you see both of them is because technically, if we're on a 499 pixel screen, we match both of these. So how does it know which one to use? It's actually going to use, in this case, the one on the bottom of the page. So if we switch these 2 around, we're actually not going to get the desired effect. We're going to see a 2-column grid here because it thinks that this one has higher priority because it's higher down the page. And that's not what we want. We want that up here. So while we're talking about priority and CSS and how it determines priority, let's talk a little bit about priority with IDs and classes. So if you remember, I talked earlier about how this has an ID and a class. And I did that intentionally for this part here. So even if, let's say this is, let's just use the class one here. So I think it was photo gallery was the class, I believe. Yep. So even though this one is the last one on the page, it won't override this one. I don't believe so anyway. Let's go ahead and refresh. No. And you can see here that if you look on the right side, this style here is crossed out, which means it was overridden by something else. And in fact, it was overridden by this. So what's going on? And in fact, this is CSS Priority basically, and it prioritizes IDs over class names, which if you think about it makes sense. We have an ID that should be unique, so if we have a style for that ID, that style should be more important than the general style for a photo gallery. So this actually, if you think about it, does make sense. But the first time you're using it, it might be confusing. You might say, well, I have a 499 pixel media query and it's not getting picked up. And anytime you have that problem, just go ahead and look in your styles. If it's here on the right side, that means it is getting picked up, but it's getting overridden by something else. And once you realize that, hopefully you can figure out what's going on that causes it to be overridden. There's other reasons that something might get overridden too as far as priority goes. So for example, if I have a home photo gallery here, and then maybe I'm targeting the A tag or something like that, this one will have a higher priority than this one because this is more specific. This is targeting a specific element on the home photo gallery, whereas this one's just targeting everything in the home photo gallery. So I'm going to find a link. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to find a link and put it in the description that talks a little bit about CSS priorities. For the most part, you shouldn't have to worry about it as long as you know that the highest priority thing that you're going to want is going to be at the bottom or underneath the other things. So, you know, if let's go ahead and put this back out here in the main container. We don't really need a min width thing because now that we understand CSS priorities, we'll know that this is the default. This will get overridden if it's 999 pixels or less, and then that will get overridden again if it's 499 pixels or less. So just to see that, let's refresh one more time. And you'll see it looks correct now. And on the right side, we see two things crossed out. We see the 999 pixel one, and we see the default one getting crossed out. So CSS priority really isn't necessarily in the scope of responsive design, but it does come up a lot because a lot of times your media queries are going to be the same selectors as you use in other places, so you need to make sure that you put them in the right spots. Okay, I think that's enough about priorities. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit while we're in here about CSS Grid and a little bit more about what it can do. So up until now, we've just been specifying the exact number of columns, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a little bit better way we could do it in this case. So let's just say we know that we want the column to be at least 250 pixels wide. Anything less than that, we should remove a column. So let's look at this for a second. If this was 250 pixels or less, we should remove that third column and bring it down into a new row, which would make that image bigger. So if we knew that, we could say repeat here, and we can give it an autofill, which is basically says fill it up as much as we can. And we can use what's called a min-max. And min-max is going to say, okay, what's the minimum we want? That's 250 pixels. And what's the maximum we want? The maximum we want is the minimum available space. So let's go ahead and just see if that works. and I'm going to get rid of these ones for now. And in fact, it doesn't quite work because it doesn't know how many columns that we really wanted. We really actually have 5 columns right now. But when we get to a certain size, it will work just fine. So now it will bring that down and bring that down again. So it kind of works. Maybe what we could do is have a media query for something that's greater than, let's just see, where does that hit? 1074, it looks like it's hitting. So let's go ahead and do, let's just do 1,000 here. Home photo gallery, whoops, media, min width 1000 pixels, home photo gallery, grid template columns, 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. So let's just back up and say, so this is what we're going to do if it's less than 1,000 pixels. And so if it's less than 1,000 pixels, we're going to fill up all the space, and it's going to have to be at least 250 pixels. And if it's not, or if it is at least 250 pixels, we're going to take up the remaining space. And we're going to fill up as many columns as we can. But when we get to 1,000 pixels or more, we want to max it out at 3 columns. So this is another way you can use a grid display. And I have another video that I'll link to in the description that goes a little bit more in depth on grid display. But this should work now. So when we're here and we are expanding out, we have 3 columns, and now we're going to start bringing this underneath. And if you didn't quite understand all that, that's fine. Just the main thing to understand here is the media queries, and and how powerful display grid is. Even if you don't quite understand it all yet, that's fine. You can kind of look into some of the documentation and see if you can figure some more of these things out. But yeah, it's very powerful. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about how we could use media queries outside of display grid. So I have a navigation bar at the top here, in which case I've got home, about, and contact. And if you've seen a mobile site, you'll know for the most part that the navigation bars are usually hidden and that they're replaced with some kind of a menu, some kind of hamburger menu type of thing. So if I go to just go to plattevillewebsolutions.com, this is my other company, and we kind of make the screen smaller, you'll see we have this little hamburger menu, and in this case, it looks like there's a little bit of a bug there actually, but it has this mobile menu instead of having the full menu. So let's go ahead and see how we would do something like that. So this is a nav element underneath the page navigation header. It has an ID of page navigation. So what we could do is we could say home, or page navigation, because that was the ID, and we could say nav. So page navigation space nav. That's going to target that nav element inside there, and we're going to put display of none on that. But we're only going to do that if the screen is small. So let's go ahead and put a media query here. And again, let's put 999 pixels here. That'll kind of be our breakpoint. All right, let's go ahead and refresh this. So if we get to, let's see, something's not quite right. Oh, because I have another style under here that puts display grid. And this goes back to the priority thing that we were talking about. And how I spotted that so quickly was I saw it over here with the display none, but the display none was crossed out. So that's how I knew something was overriding it. So in fact, we have to put this underneath, and now it should be fine. Let's go ahead and refresh. And now it should be fine. 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 And now it And there we go. So we're hiding the entire nav, which may not exactly be what you want to do. Maybe we just want to hide the A tags. So let's put space A here. And there we go. We still have our navigation section up here that we could put a mobile menu thing on there. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go here. So inside the nav, let's just go ahead and put a button. And normally we would put some kind of icon there, but let's just put the word menu. So the idea would be when you hit the menu, it would open up the navigation. Now we're not going to implement all of that today because that involves some JavaScript, but let's just see if we can get this to show up. So we hit refresh and it looks good. So if this was working, we could hit the menu and this would open up the menu. But we have a problem, and that is we are still showing the menu button on a larger screen device. So what can we do? We could do the same type of thing here. So in this case, we're going to do min width of 1,000 pixels. And we're not going to look for the A tag anymore. We're going to look for the button tag. And we're going to put display none on that. So again, this is very powerful stuff, showing and hiding things depending on the screen size. And there we go. It is now gone. When we get to a certain width, the menu button pops up and the links go away. So already we're starting to see some things that we can do for responsive design. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and talk about one more thing. I think we have time. So there's something called the picture element, and this is kind of new. Actually, you know what? We're going to cover picture next time. I don't want to get into that quite yet. But what I do want to talk about is some other thing that the media queries can do. We've been using max width and min width, which is great. But let's go ahead and look and see on the documentation what other things we can do. And here is an interesting one, prefers color scheme. Let's go ahead and see what that is. So let's just copy some code here. And we'll just stick it right here at the bottom. So what this means is if the user's device is on dark mode, and this is kind of a newer thing, and this just goes to show you what other media queries you can use. So let's go, we don't need this, but let's go ahead and change our overall background of our page. So the HTML, I think, well, maybe it's body. We'll put body. The body background color, let's go ahead and put that as black. And it shouldn't probably be completely black because that's not very natural. So let's put slightly lighter than black. And we haven't even talked about hex values for colors yet. So actually, let's just put black. And let's put for color, we'll put white. And color just means the font color. So if I refresh my screen, we're not going to see any differences because I'm not on dark mode. But let me switch to dark mode now. So I'm going to open up in Windows. There's this colors, which you can get to from your control panel settings. What I just did is I just typed in dark in the search bar. It's on my other monitor, so you can't see it, but that's all I did is I typed in dark and it brought this up. So if I switch to dark mode, now you'll immediately notice that the web page changed, giving me a dark background with a white text here. And that's pretty cool. So really, the web page is not only responsive to the size of the screen, but it's responsive to other things as well. including dark mode potentially. There are other things that you can do, such as when we get into animations later in this course, we'll talk about animations, and there's something called prefers reduced motion for people that don't like animations. Maybe it makes them sick or something like that. So you can check the device to see if they prefer not having animations, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of neat things here. Definitely take a look. The ones that I kind of mentioned are the ones that I use the most. I've started using dark mode on some of my websites. It's definitely kind of cool. So yeah, I think that's about all I want to cover today. So definitely tune in next time. We're going to talk about the picture tag and some other kind of leftover things that we didn't talk about in this one that we can use for responsive design. So all right, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.